this is dumb. It doesn't make sense. It's dangerous. Why would you? I mean, just the whole thing. I mean, in the United States, I was presenting these things for 2 or 3 years. And, I was just, taking a lot of shit for it, basically, from everyone, from all angles.
So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the last episode of season 1 of the Rhinoplasty podcast. What an adventure it has been. We've had 6 months of interviewing some of the most dynamic people around the world. And in this month, in the month of August, it's everything's about preservation rhinoplasty. And we're really chuffed that it's brought to us by Comeg. They're this very cool French company who make the piezotome. And if you listen right to the end of the podcast, I'm going to give you the contact details for the person you need to email to get a whopping discount on this. So that's our little background for today. And today is literally the cherry on the cake of a podcast that's gone around the world more than 30,000 times to more than 70 countries. I've been so honored to have the most incredible people to talk to about rhinoplasty, about their life, about what makes them tick. And the cherry on the cake is all the way from California, Aaron Kosins. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I've never been called a cherry before, but I'll take it.
Dude, you're the cherry, man. That's your new nickname, maybe. So, Aaron, tell us, before we get into rhinoplasty,
sure,
what made you decide to go into this speciality that we're so passionate about?
Oh, so when I was in medical school, I actually wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon. And, you kind of end up doing what the people that you like do. And it turned out that the residents that were orthopedic surgeons at the hospital I worked at, they were just, they were kind of nerdy, just, I just didn't get along with them very well. They just weren't really my kind of guys. And so there was a general surgeon I worked with who said, you should go work with the plastic surgeons. They're super cool. So, I did like a 2 or 3 week rotation over Christmas break and just fell in love with the people that were in that program. And, they were the most amazing surgeons I saw. I mean, they were just so talented in the things that they were doing. I said, I want to be like that. And so that's how it happened. And then when I was in my residency, we spent 6 months at this one surgery center, and Roland Daniel worked there. And so going in, I was really interested in rhinoplasty, and I had this opportunity to work with who at the time was, probably one of the 3 best guys in the world. And so I spent, 6 months with him, read all of his books, and then we eventually became partners. And I mean, I was just very lucky. I was in the right place at the right time and got to learn from this world master. And he's an amazing guy. I don't know if you've ever met him, but he's an amazing, amazing guy. And I have my whole career. I have him to thank, basically.
Oh, well, it's awesome. And the nice thing about it is that sure, you're in the right place at the right time, but you're like standing on his shoulders to take this whole thing so much further. And yeah, I mean, what you are busy doing and teaching is you've got, on the one side, you've got this thing where you can teach internationally, but you've also got the pressure of having to kind of be the face and the forefront of preservation rhinoplasty in the United States. Tell the listeners a little bit about how this resurgence or revolution of preservation rhinoplasty has influenced your life over the last few years.
So the first time I saw an actual dorsal preservation talk, I remember I was in Paris. We have this small rhinoplasty. It's not a society. It's just a group of guys that like doing nose surgery and drinking wine. It's called the International Rhinoplasty Research Society. There's like 10 people in it. And so we had organized this meeting in Paris, and Gerardo from Brazil gave this talk. Now, at the time, I didn't know what he was doing, but he was basically doing a coddle procedure. And so, he's showing these videos, and, me and Roland were sitting next to each other. And I said, that is the craziest, dumbest thing I've ever seen. And he said, yeah, that's insane. We didn't know what we were looking at. And so I just didn't even know what it was. And then, maybe in about 2015, Rollin went to visit Yves Saban. They've been friends for a long time in Nice. And he came back and he said, I just saw the most mind-bending thing I've ever seen. And he started to describe what Yves was doing. He said, this is the future. And this was in his last maybe 3 months of practice. He was still going around the world, learning this stuff. And then in, I think it was April of 2016, I arranged a trip to Napa Valley. And it was me, Rollin, Yves Saban, Charles East, Olivier Gervaux, Milos Kovacevic, and Guxel from Turkey. And so there was like 7 of us. And so because I had arranged the trip and I was the new inductee into the society, I had actually arranged every morning we would give rhinoplasty presentations. And so it was like 2 hours of rhinoplasty in the morning, and then we'd go drink wine all day. And so I tasked Yves with talking about this thing. And so we sat there, and for like 2 hours, he gave this presentation and we asked a bunch of questions. And I think he'd been presenting this stuff for a decade, but nobody just understood what he was doing. And so, we talked about it and we thought about it. And then I drove Yves to the airport, and, Rollin was telling me, you need to do this. You need to figure this out. And so, I drive Yves to the airport. I'm asking him all these questions. And then I thought about it for like 6 or 8 weeks. And then finally, I just found what I thought was the right patient, and I just went for it. And, and then I spent 2 years trying to figure out the surgery with all these guys, because at the same time, everybody kind of went home and we started talking about it and messaging about it and emailing about it and having these meetings about it. And around the same time, Barish, from Istanbul, had gone to Budapest, because that's where Peter Palhazi does all these different dissections. And so they were doing a different thing. And then Yves showed Barish, how to do this on a cadaver, and Barish just freaked out. And so he went back to Turkey and started doing it. And then, Valerio Finocchi picked it up in Rome. And so at the same time, we were all, starting to do this and asking Yves thousands of questions and talking to each other and just little by little figuring out how to do the surgery. And then it just, we started, having meetings and, writing the first articles on preservation rhinoplasty. And then, of course, the 3 volumes of the book. And so it followed the same path that piezo surgery did, when Olivier and I, and Rollin wrote the first paper on that. Olivier had been doing it 3 months. I came back to the United States, started doing it. And, it's the same path where, at least in the United States, you start presenting these things, and these guys are starting to present these things in Europe. And it's just met with this animosity and massive hostility. This is dumb. It doesn't make sense. It's dangerous. Why would you? Just the whole thing. In the United States, I was presenting these things for 2 or 3 years. And I was just, taking a lot of shit for it, basically, from everyone, from all angles. And the same thing was happening in Europe. You go to these meetings, and I almost saw fights break out between surgeons. And so anyway, over the last 5 years, it's now evolved into this, revolution in rhinoplasty that I think, almost everybody has somewhat adopted at some level. And so it's just been interesting, because again, I watched the same thing happen with piezo surgery. It's just this hostility towards a new idea, especially when it's coming from young people. And then, I used to say, listen, the results and time will tell. And so if the results are good over time, people adopt things. And so what I really learned from everything is you got to be really open to new ideas, and when people present things at any level, because, they can be really inspiring. I don't know. Yeah, hopefully that answered the question.
No, that's fascinating, because I've actually interviewed almost all the people you mentioned, and poor old Yves, What a man. 20 years of preaching until somebody finally got converted. And now the whole world's been taken by storm.
Right. Yeah, no, Eve was out. You know, the thing is that these operations are being done in Mexico and Brazil for a really long time, but they're doing, this coddle or spar technique. And that surgery, which I do a lot, is extremely complicated and very difficult to understand. And the learning curve is not fun. And so it makes sense to me why that initially will not catch on. But what Eve was doing was much simpler to understand, much simpler to execute. If you didn't like what was happening, you could convert to what you have always done. And so it was that high strip, push down, let down technique that kind of got people to feel comfortable with the idea, and then you can expand into that. But yeah, Eve for 20 years has been doing this, and it's just, he was just banging the drum by himself, I guess. But now, look what he's created. It's amazing.
Okay, so Aaron, I've got a question for the more junior colleagues who might be listening, guys who really just want to start getting into it, or maybe are even in their residency. What would your advice be in terms of that? Would you consider saying to the guys, first, just get in there and learn how to open up the nose properly before you even start thinking about preservation techniques? Or what is your advice to the juniors?
Okay, so component reduction, structural rhinoplasty has to be the basis, in my mind, of what you do, because you want to get to a point where you can get yourself into and out of any issue and solve a variety of problems. And then once you feel comfortable with that, then you can move into preservation. And so in, the book, Preservation Rhinoplasty, or even when I give lectures, I talk about the learning curve of preservation rhinoplasty and the different types of dorsal preservation in particular, and how to go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, because you don't want to do what I did. When I started, no one else was doing this except for, basically one person in Nice that I knew, and I'm not there. And so we're all trying to figure out this operation as we go. To this day, I've still never seen someone do an SPQR or caudal or whatever you want to call it. I do it every week, but I've never seen another surgeon do it. So what I'm saying is that now, because there's papers and there's books and there's courses and there's cadavers, you can learn how to do this and take all of that information and go to the surgery with it. You don't have to, reinvent the wheel. But I think structural rhinoplasty is, at least for me, I know there's guys that do 100% preservation, but for me, I'm probably 50-50. And so, if you're going to have a rhinoplasty practice, you're going to do secondaries, you're going to get crooked noses, you're going to get all kinds of things. Particularly in Southern California, only 25% of my patients are Caucasian or European in background. There's a lot of Latin people, Indian, Asian, and so structural rhinoplasty, you can do any nose with structural rhinoplasty, but preservation is best reserved for the best candidates. You want to do the easiest surgery to get the best result. And so you got to know everything.
That's cool. And in terms of the senior colleagues, I think the Telegram group that is on preservation it's fantastic. There's so much teaching going on that group. What are some of your comments? Because I have a sense that sometimes there's this feeling people want to jump on the bandwagon and just slightly tweak a thing and put their name to it, etc. What do you think about that?
So I'm very comfortable in admitting that I've never invented anything. And most of us have not. Anything that you think that you've thought of that's unique, you go back one generation and over one language and it was already described. I tend to, I'm a guy who has no political affiliation. I belong to the Rhinoplasty Society. I present there every year. I'm not on the board. I've never been offered a position. I don't have I'm apolitical. I don't care because I love rhinoplasty. It's my passion. I do it for me. I like teaching it, but I don't need to put my name on anything. Even I remember when I was doing preservation, and I started doing cartilage preservation on a lot of Latin patients. And I thought, wow, it was something that my mind came up with. But you look back and, Ishida's been doing it since 1999 and his son's described it. And Miguel over in Portugal is doing, it's the same thing. So, for me personally, putting your names, it's an ego thing, right? It's like when you go to a meeting, right? There's only 3 reasons to go to a meeting if you're presenting. 1, you're there to learn something, right? 2, you're there to see your friends. Or 3, it's your ego, right? So for me, when I go, like I love Enrico's Bergamo meeting. Every time I go there, I learn something. I learn something new. But a lot of the guys that are teaching at these meetings, people are giving talks and they're not even watching. They're playing on their phone. They're working on their presentation. And so why are they really going there? It's some sort of ego. And then you see people presenting the same presentation. There are guys that I've been watching giving the same presentation with the same patients since I was a resident. So I've been watching for over a decade as these people show the same patients, the same techniques. It's like, I don't understand that. I mean, if you're going to teach, then just, talk about your experience and if there's any evidence to it, but trying to put your name on every little thing. I mean, I think that's just an ego thing. I mean, when I think about the things that are unique, like when you talk about Barish's polygon tipplasty, right? That's a unique concept. That's Barish Checker's unique dissection, understanding of Patengi ligament complex, using a lateral curl steel and a strut to do something that is his idea. That is his mind. That is his operation. That is a truly unique thing. But, just look at the septal extension graft. I mean, there's 10 different variations with 42 different names. And it's all been done before, that's not unique. And so that's my opinion on it. As you know, rhinoplasty is the most humbling operation, right? Some days you go to work and you go, oh man, I am so good at this. And then the next day you go to work and you go, what happened? I suck or whatever it is. What happened there? And so, you gotta hold that with you.
Oh, no, those are great comments, eh? It reminds me of one of the comments I love Rod Rorick said. He said, hey, Cameron, everyone's world famous on their own website.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
Sure. Okay, so it's so interesting that you say to me about 50% of the surgeries you do are actually preservation. So the next question is also, in terms of how many rhinoplasties do you actually do? Because I remember Wolfgang got quite psyched up about this, saying, but Cameron, you have these guys who say they do 500 rhinoplasties in a year. Do they not sleep at night? So I'll be interested. I mean, you are solely rhinoplasty practice.
Basically,
And how much are you operating a year?
So if I'm in town, I typically do about 8 to 10 surgeries a week. And so, what does that equate to? Probably 350 rhinoplasties if I was here, every week. But I'm not. I like to go on vacation. I always take, 10 days and go work at a winery in Napa. I'm, going to France for a couple weeks. So, it's 300 plus. And at least for me, in the next 5 years, I'm actually going to slow that down even more because, at one point in my career, I wanted to do as much as I could all the time. But, my days of doing 3 rhinoplasties a day, I mean, I don't really want to do that sometimes. So, like last week I did, 2 on Monday, 3 on Tuesday, 1 on Wednesday, 1 on Thursday, 3 on Friday. That's a lot. That's just so much, and then I come home on Friday, and I'm like done. And It's just too much. And so I don't know how guys do 500 rhino. And then it also depends on how long your surgeries take. You look at a guy like Dean Toriumi, his operations take 6-7 hours for what he's doing. And so, he can probably do one a day, maybe two. And so they're going to do way less. It depends. I mean, Wolfgang's, I've watched him operate. I mean, he was very adept at taking apart and putting back together very difficult noses very fast. But, so anyway, long story short, I do 300 plus per year, and that's where I max out. I mean, I don't want to do more than that.
Sure. So now tell me, you clearly love your wine. Have you ever had South African wines?
Yes. Not that many, though. Not that many.
Well,
but I have.
We've been toying with this idea with the rest of the IRS guys to have a rhinoplasty wine tour to South Africa. So I hope we're going to do that with you guys one day. And tell me one of your other passions.
What's that?
I say one of your other passions is surfing. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So I grew up here in Southern California and also in Hawaii. And the town I grew up in is very well known for surfing. It's called San Clemente. And so, where I grew up in most of the United States, being on the football team, it was like being on the soccer team if you were in England. But where I grew up, being on the surf team was the big deal. And so I've been surfing since I was, probably 6 or 7 years old. And, it's the same thing as when you're doing surgery. You go out there and you don't think about anything else. You're in the moment. And I love that. I love being in the water first thing in the morning. There's no wind, there's no one around, just the calm sea. It's just something you become addicted to when you're young, and then it just doesn't. It never goes away. And so it's. The waves are good today. So after we get done talking, my wife has something she's doing.
We'll get you out there. I do a lot of whitewater kayaking and also surf ski paddling. So I love being out in the ocean and being out in nature, etc. So Aaron, tell me about
sharks in South Africa.
Proper. We just down the road from J Bay, where they have the Billabong Pro and
right, and lots of
great whites.
Yeah, no, thank you.
So tell me, what has been your worst experience ever in a rhinoplasty and why?
Worst experience ever. Gosh. I mean, I've had so many. I mean, if I'm being very honest, I've had every problem you can possibly have because, the most, I've said this before, the greatest things I've ever done have been when I've been the most uncomfortable. The best wave I ever caught, the best woman I ever met, the best, things that I've learned doing nasal surgery. It happens when you're, extremely uncomfortable and you push yourself to a limit to do something that you can't do or that other people can't do, whatever it is. And so I've learning the SPQR. I had some really difficult learning curve with that. Maybe 2 or 3, 4 years ago, I was at a point in my career where I was just trying to do, I was trying to take on the most difficult, revisions and secondary surgeries, that were out there. And I just wanted to know how to fix everything. And so there were just so many times when, you get into those, you're about an hour and a half, 2 hours in, you take everything apart and you just go, oh my God, what have I done? And how am I going to put this all back together? And so I can remember 2 specific situations where things were very bad. One was, I remember that I was doing a revision on a girl who, she lives on the East Coast, and she's a very beautiful girl, and she's, she's an actress, and she's a known person, and so her nose wasn't going to be that difficult to fix. It was an easy secondary, and when I went to go take her rib, I couldn't quite, basically her ribs were completely replaced with bone. They were just so calcified. And so I had to use the piezo to take out a rib, and I had to cut every graft like it was bone and drill holes. And instead of the surgery taking me 2.5 hours, it ended up taking me 5 or 6 hours. And I just, she ended up healing well, and it worked out, but that was a horrible feeling. That was a really horrible feeling. And, learning the SPQR technique, I had some real issues because I was doing the high strip, and the flattening techniques can actually be very detrimental in low strip. I just didn't understand. And so I had, 4 or 5 experiences that were bad. And then my last operation before COVID, I opened a girl's nose who'd had multiple previous surgeries, and I split the right upper lateral off the dorsum, and I was looking at a hole about this big where she was missing lining, like, 3 centimeters by probably 17 or 18 millimeters. The lining is just not there. And so, it's experiences like that where, and I remember because I was doing that surgery, and then that night I was leaving to Dallas to go to Rod's meeting because we had combined our preservation and the Dallas meeting. And so, so it's just things like that. I mean, it feels really bad, but, you figure it out. And, that's kind of the fun of it. What about you? What's your worst?
That meeting was my most expensive rhinoplasty of my life, because I took a week off the practice to go and hang out with Rod and Spencer and be at the course. And halfway through our first rhinoplasty with Spencer, the hospital manager came in and shut the theater and said, COVID's closed. So I had to get back on the plane, fly back to South Africa, and then I had to isolate for 2 weeks. So for 3 weeks, I had to pay to go to America, 3 weeks of no income, 1 rhinoplasty. Oh, it was terrible. Yeah.
Brutal.
And what about your best experience in rhinoplasty?
I don't know if I could say it's. I don't know if I could say that one thing was the best that I can remember, but I remember when Valerio had shown me a couple patients and Eve, they showed me patients where, it was a nose that if I were to have seen it 4 or 5 years ago, the way I would have done it would be so difficult. And they showed me these surgeries where they were essentially fixing the whole nose by doing everything inside, meaning no dissection of the tip, no dissection of the dorsum, just moving the foundation of the nose around. And I remember the first patient I did like that. And so it was a surgery that in the past might have taken me 3 hours, and instead it took 40 minutes and turned out so much better. And, it's when those things click. I remember the first time that I did a push down, and it actually just, I remember the first time that I did a high strip push down. I remember I was working with a scrub tech named Brianna, and she actually, Rollin trained her, and they worked together for 10 years, and I've worked with her my whole career. And I remember when I made that cut, that high cut under the dorsum, and I had this horrible feeling of like impending doom and back pain, and I sat down, and she said, you can fix anything. You're going to be fine. She's talking to me, right? And so I kind of pulled it together and, finished the surgery, but I didn't know what I was doing. And then over time is learned more and more and more and just got more and more comfortable, and so I don't know, every week I feel that way. Sometimes surgeries just go exactly as you plan and you really simplify them. And then, I don't know what my number one best experience is, but when you're trying to learn something and it just finally clicks, it's amazing.
Yeah, that's cool. So I want to ask you another question. I had a supper with orthopedic surgeon colleague of mine last night, and he was saying to me that he thinks it's super risky to do any surgery on somebody because the statistics are if you do surgery and they get COVID, they've got a 50% higher mortality than before. And I was thinking, that's very interesting, Is that necessarily in rhinoplasty? Because we're not doing these big abdominal surgeries or joint replacements, et cetera, et cetera. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I think first of all, we're lucky. I mean, at least for me, with a rhinoplasty practice, the bulk of my patients are super young and super healthy.
Yes.
And as soon as when the pandemic started, and we immediately started doing PCR testing in my office. I just said, this is something that we need to be comfortable doing, that we need to be in charge of. And so, since COVID started, I've done over 500 rhinoplasties, I'm sure, and we've never had somebody, have that issue. But, I think as long as you're testing people before and they're reasonable and, doing everything that they should be doing, it's not a problem. But certainly if you're operating on, people who are older or sick or in a hospital, I mean, it's a very real problem. And, as you know, since we operate in the nose, that's the belly of the beast. I mean, that's where COVID lives. So there was a time when I was doing betadine rinses on myself, my nose and my throat, 4 or 5 times a day for months. This was before we really knew what was going on. And so it's been interesting, but I think as long as you know the risks and you're really on top of it, you can do safe surgery. And so, if I have any questions, I mean, I have a lot of people that come from out of town, and there was a point where I was making them take a COVID test in the state they were in. Then they would take another COVID test in my office, and then they do another rapid test the day before surgery. So there were people I was testing 3 times just to make sure that there weren't any issues. And so, you just got to do what's safe, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know what the right answer is. There's one thing I know about COVID. It's that we don't know shit about COVID.
It's true. And it's not going away. It's here to stay for a while. So, okay, my last question for you, because you got to get out and sort those waves out, is for the listeners that are like really far removed from maybe North America and Europe to be able to get to congresses, etc. What's your words of encouragement to the guys out there in the front line in countries we might hardly ever visit in terms of being rhinoplasty surgeons?
There's a way to go about learning rhinoplasty. There's a way to do it, right? And the way to do it, in my opinion, is to, number one, get Roland Daniels' book. That book is the best rhinoplasty book ever written. His Atlas and then Mastering Rhinoplasty. It's easy to understand, fun to read, and builds on itself. And if you do that operation, you may not hit home runs every time, but you're certainly going to stay out of trouble and build on a solid surgery and then expand your techniques. And by the way, there's so many videos that go along with it. And so once you do that, then I think you need to become comfortable with that, and then you start expanding your techniques by reading other people's stuff, watching their videos, for preservation, getting the Preservation Rhinoplasty book. Me and Dino are going to make a series of videos on those surgeries. But if you want to be good at rhinoplasty, I mean, unfortunately, it's just something that you have to think about constantly, like more than anything, and really pay attention to your surgeries and watch how people heal. Take copious notes, take really good pictures. I think the one thing that's astounding to me is that I think photographs are the most important learning tool, right? You need to take really good before and after photos so you really understand what's happening over time. And so when I go to meetings, the most interesting thing is looking at how bad people's photos are. And I don't know if they don't take them themselves or if they just didn't set up their studio correctly or what it is. But if you don't have time to take good photos and study them, I don't know how you have time to do good surgeries and become a better surgeon. And so that's the number one thing I would say is you have to take really good standardized photos yourself. That's my opinion, yourself. And really, I remember Rollin and I, we used to, I would go through like 6 months of surgeries, and then I'd go back and look at the photos the patients I operated on, where did I have problems, look at the photos, compare the operative. I mean, you've got to do that. That's just how, that's how you get better. And then, visiting people around the world is important. I mean, you don't want to spend all your time doing that, but if you like someone's results, you want to go and figure out how they get that result. And a lot of people are very bad at explaining how they do things. It makes sense in their mind, but they can't explain it. So you just have to go and watch and understand. And so, I mean, you just have to make a lifelong commitment to learning the surgery. You can't learn by osmosis.
100%. No, all of those things. I mean, I remember Miguel saying to me, Cameron, if you didn't take photographs, you didn't do the surgery. And I've been so fortunate to visit people all over the world. I think I get so much more out of being in the OR or being in the consulting and seeing than seeing some guy give his best results at a congress,
When we were, we just had that preservation meeting over in Istanbul, and I went and watched Guxel do a couple surgeries. And, I learned more there than watching all of the presentations, just the special ways he exposes some things and does some things and he asks questions and So, I remember when Barish came to Newport Beach like 7 or 8 years ago, he barely spoke English and talking about things, trying to understand what he was talking about. And then, I've been to Istanbul so many times and watched him operate, and it took so long for so many of his concepts to click in my mind for me to understand them. They're complicated, and what's going on in someone's brain sometimes it's very difficult. And so, like I said, if you want to be really good at rhinoplasty, you just have to think about it constantly. And I always encourage people, give presentation. If you want to really understand something, give a presentation on it, give a talk on it, and then write an article. I mean, if you write a peer-reviewed article that gets accepted, you really understand what you're talking about. And Rollin always forced me to write all kinds of stuff. And and I say forced because, he just constantly was on me to do things. And it really, really helped because it solidified all the things that I was thinking about in my mind. You got to put it on paper and organize it. There's going to be a paper coming out in PRS that myself, Dean Toriumi, and Milos Kovakovic wrote. And it was interesting because you have Dean trying to explain like his thought process for how he's doing these operations. And so, his mind is obviously working at some level that 99% of people will never, ever, ever understand or attain. So I'm reading this stuff, and I was helping to organize and write things in a way that this would actually make sense to people who are just reading it for the first time. And so those exercises are so helpful. That's why, Rollin, me and Rollin edit the rhinoplasty section of the Aesthetic Surgery Journal, and we very often get, involved in helping people write their articles. And it's one, to make them better articles for people to read. But man, I learned so much just from, taking a more raw manuscript and just asking a bunch of questions, trying to figure out what are you actually trying to say? How do you present this information? And it's just something you get really into. I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah, Aaron, listen, it's been great chatting to you, man. I think on behalf of all the listeners around the world, thanks for taking your Sunday afternoon away from the waves and just sharing your heart and your passion. It's a breath of fresh air, hearing how humble you are about this stuff, and it's stuff you just enjoy doing. And, so on behalf of the listeners from around the world, thank you very much for your time.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I look forward to meeting you in person one day.
No, we're going to get you to South Africa. I'm going to come to California. And okay, so the listeners who've gotten, I beg your pardon?
This next year, Rod and I have combined my preservation meeting with Dallas Rhino, but for in person. So I don't know if you were planning on coming next March, but that's going to be a great meeting because, in the United States, most of the people here, they don't even know who most of the amazing rhinoplasty surgeons are, in the Middle East and Turkey and Europe and South Africa. Mm. And so I've tried to invite a bunch of people that none of the people in the United States don't even know their names. And, these are the guys that are on the forefront of these kinds of things. And so I think
what are the dates for that meeting?
Will be amazing.
What are the dates for that meeting?
I think it's March. I think it's March 12th to the 14th.
The 12th is a Saturday, so it'll probably start on the Friday.
Yeah, I can actually, let me look it up real quick. I'm sure.
That's 2 weeks before Enrico's Bergamo meeting.
Right. That's exactly right. And so, it'll be a great meeting. We have, cause again, I tried to invite a bunch of people that, at least the Americans or people from South America and Latin America, Barish is coming from Turkey. Guxel's coming from Turkey. Valerio's coming.
Brilliant.
Eve's coming. Peter's coming. We invited a bunch of people and they all said yes. So, there's going to be the lectures and then there's also going to be that huge cadaver course. And so, I'll be having Eve showing his high strip push down and Valerio showing his SBQR and Peter doing the anatomy and probably have Dino Eliasnia doing the closed tip surgery. And so, I think it's structure meets preservation and it should be really good. And, Rod's done he does a great job of organizing that meeting. And so we really worked hard on the programming. And so one of the other things is, so normally when you go to a meeting, right, that person says, Aaron, what do you want to talk about? You send in your 6 topics. So I'm not that nice. So when the guys come, I kind of say, this is what I want you to talk about. And so I don't have that presentation. So I understand. So for example, Barish one time showed me this it was, I don't know if it was a presentation, it was just something that he made on tip projection. And it was like the most brilliant thing I'd ever seen. And so we had some sort of online meeting. I was like, you have to present that. That's so amazing. And so anyway, you force people out of their comfort zone a little bit, but they end up, talking about these things that they really understand. They've just never made a presentation of. So it should be pretty cool.
No, that'll be great. I really hope. It's going to be 2 years since COVID hit, eh? So I hope that people are saving up now because, guys, those are 2 of the most awesome meetings. But in 2 months' time, we're having our own saucer meeting in South Africa, thanks to Rod telling me to start the society. And we've got Olivia and Miguel actually doing live surgery. So that's going to be pretty cool. Looking forward to
Olivia
that. End
and
of
Miguel?
October. Miguel, they're coming out. They're going to do a safari and have some wine to drink as well. And then we're operating and we're talking at the meeting. So all around, it should be a good time.
Yeah,
so guys, I just want to give a shout out to those people who might be interested in buying the piezo tome. You got to get hold of a guy called Richard Maloney. So you can direct message me, or I'm going to just read out his email address. So it's RM for Richard Maloney, RM at MaloneyMedtech.com. That is MOLONEY hyphen MEDTECH.com. So get hold of Richard. And that brings us to the end of 6 months of the Rhinoplasty podcast. I've got 3 thank yous. The first thank you, I want to give a shout out to the listeners around the world. Thank you, people, for tolerating all these mistakes and questions and all sorts of things, but it's been absolutely great to get the comments and the feedback. I've loved it. I've really enjoyed 6 months of learning from the world's best. The second shout out is to all our sponsors. So every single month had a different sponsor. I'm just going to read through those guys from Medhold, Carl Storz, Pentax Loops, Vectra, Suta, Allegan, and Piezo. Guys, thank you so much. And then I actually just need to read out the names of that's my last thank you, is the people who took time off to teach. Guys, I so appreciate it. From Miguel, Sam, and Travis in February, Jeff, Roxana, Vitali, and Barman in March, Robin, Filio, Gillian, and Mariana in April, Paul, Lucas, Lysandra, Andy, and Dave in May, Profs Dean, Roderick, and Peter in June, Fazal, Wolfgang, Hesham, and Enrico in July, and now in August to Yves and Barish and Olivia and Aaron. Guys, thank you very much. It's you guys are inspiring people, and thank you for your time. And we look forward to a season 2 when I've had a break. It's been taking its toll on my life and my practice as well, but I've enjoyed it very much. So we will be seeing you guys again sometime. Thank you for all the listeners around the world, and come back for season 2 in a few months' time.
Thanks, Cameron.